few housekeeping items. The first one, of course, is to thank IDEMIA for the reception last night. Very enjoyable for all, and another great and perhaps last evening networking session, so I think we all enjoyed it. Again, thank you very much to IDEMIA. And today's all-day coffee is sponsored by Veridos. So again, thank you to Veridos as well, and an invitation to visit the 5th floor. We'll get going right away with Section 6, Advanced Passenger Information. It'll be an interactive session, and it will be led by Mr. Christopher Hornek. Chris is the ICAO Project Manager and Passenger Data Exchange Expert. So, Chris, it's all yours. And welcome.
Thank you, Denis. Good morning, and welcome to Session 6. It's my honor, my pleasure to be your moderator this morning. We have a very nice panel here of distinguished experts to speak to you about advanced passenger information, both in terms of processing and analysis. So we heard yesterday evening about, we had a basic introduction to API from OAC. We also heard from IOM about what they're doing in regards to assisting states to implement API. And today we'll be hearing at least from about 2 of these solutions which are being offered to states, namely the Traveler Information Portal, which was developed by the Dutch Ministry of Justice and Security, has been donated to the United Nations, as well as the World Customs Organization solution, GTAS. We will also be hearing about the Brazilian experience on passenger data, and then we will also hear from Interpol about what to do with this data, and we will also be hearing from IATA, the International Air Transport Association, specifically on a presentation on the next step, which is, so to say, interactive API. We also have in addition to our panel, we have at the end of the first presentation by Jelle Postma, we will be hearing a little bit from the United Nations IT Center, how they are working with the Dutch Ministry on providing this traveler information portal to states. So, I would like to now introduce Mr. Jelle Postma, who will be giving his presentation at the outset here about the Travel Information Portal, which he developed in his time at the Dutch Ministry of Justice and Security at the Office of the Coordinator for Security and Counter-Terrorism. Jelle has been there for a number of years, and before that he was working at the General Intelligence and Security Service of the Netherlands as an intelligence officer. He has a number of years of experience, practical hands-on experience also with API and PNR, and he will tell us about the TRIP portal. Jelle, thank you.
All right, let's see if everything is set up. I'm using an Apple, so there was a small panic here because VGA cables and Apple not really compatible. So let's try and see if the technology supports us today. Yes, I will not talk about API only. I'm sorry about that. I will include PNR. For us, very important. Of course, many of you know the 2178 resolution, which was very important to us all, stimulating the use of API in the field of foreign fighters, countering terrorism. Of course, now fortunately for all of us, this got an extra impulse by the new Security Council Resolution 2396, forcing us all to also include PNR in this detection capacity building initiatives that we must undertake. And why are we doing this? I'm not going to talk about the foreign fighters problems because We are all aware of these problems. We know where it stands. But of course, I'm from the National Counter-Terrorism Coordinator's Office. We did a lot to counter the travel to Syria and Iraq, and of course now trying to monitor as much as possible the returnees. But this is not a new phenomena. Just 3 examples where thousands and thousands of foreign fighters engaged and after their engagement traveled on to fight new wars. This is not something new. This is something that has existed for a long time and will exist. And this is not only about terrorism. And keep in mind the Somalia picture, because I will end with a very positive note on that. There's a lot of analysis going on about what they do when they come back. There's a lot of options, some of them good, rehabilitation, integration after their sentence. Some of them not really that good, and reason for us to stay on the highest alert. Well, in the Netherlands, the second highest. But we're not only talking about countering terrorism. We're also talking about the detection of smuggling goods, voluntary or as a victim. Keep in mind that there's a lot of victims there being used and exploited. Smuggling of cash, of course. The Abdul Muttalib bomber, 2009, I don't know if you remember, Christmas time above Detroit, the above picture. That has something to do with aviation security, a lot to do with aviation security. And then there's, of course, the human smuggling and human trafficking issue we need to engage with much more than we do now. So why do we do it? Why do we need this detection capacity and increase and help each other build their own detection capacity? Is because we need to identify, we need to know where people are, when they are there. So we are given the possibility to intervene. We in the Netherlands do not call this a border management topic or tool. This tool, what we developed, is used to counter terrorism and detect serious and organized crime. I'm not saying it can't be used for facilitation as well, but that's up to the country itself. We don't dominate anything. It's up to you. We don't use it that way. Due to several political reasons I won't bore you with, but it is an interesting discussion always, the differences between migration, customs, and law enforcement issues such as the detection of foreign fighters and terrorism. So what we did is we identified a pattern. I'm not sure if you can read it all. It's not really necessary. Above it says that you need to collect the right information. Then of course you need to check that information against the relevant databases such as Interpol. And don't forget to also send the people you're looking for to Interpol, because we're talking about matching SLTD and I-24/7 and use it better. But using it better also means sending information to Interpol. And then there's, of course, the connection part. We need to connect to have our systems interoperable and make sure that we exchange the relevant information about possible threats. So our answer in the middle of this triangle was to build our passenger information unit. This passenger information unit has a lot of challenging topics. Of course, the legislation, the technology, the data. You shouldn't forget that you need data. So engagement with industry is one of the first steps you should take. Don't just, write your legislation and say, well, I've got a very good sanction regime with very high fines. You will go into a dead road. You need to walk hand in hand with industry. So what we did is we built our own national detection travel information portal. I'm sure we can think of another name since TRIP seems to be taken. Anyway, we developed it after having consulted with many commercial parties, and also the US for with regard to GTAS, now the WCO tool. We decided in the end to build our own system. Fortunately, and Mauricio will talk about that in a minute, that meant that the intellectual property remained with the Netherlands. And that meant that we, after construction, were allowed to share the tool with other member states in need of their own detection capacity, either because they were forced to do so due to a EU PNR directive, or the 2396, which also, of course, is obligatory, or really because they needed to. So we helped out a lot of countries until my Director General said, keep in mind we're a national coordinator, and this is too much heavy lifting. So then we found a partner which we gave away our system to, which Mauricio will talk about in a minute. So yeah, it collects data you don't understand if you're new to it. Fortunately, technology helps us out. I'm not going to talk about the data itself, since Simon already explained that yesterday with very comprehensive, easy to understand explanations. I highlighted here the single window principle. And this is one of the examples that, you know, there's not always only success to be mentioned. It's also very important to share mistakes. For example, we promote, and I know that in Annex 9 this is discussed as well, we promote the use of single window, not single windows. So one single window to collect passenger data for government use. Don't talk about single windows like we do in the Netherlands. And it's a very hard process, very difficult to process, to get everything together and to close the gaps. But we must make sure that we relieve or lessen the burden for the carriers, because they're stuck with 193 member states of the UN now implementing these systems, and it's heavy lifting for them as well. So the TRIP system contains two main platforms. The first one is to collect passenger data in the single window. Again, the collection part is a solid, very firm part of the foundation of a unit, and you're never done. You will keep on doing that. The UK is now working on it for 10 years with in their National Border and Targeting Center, and they're not up to 100% yet. So it is work in progress. It always will be. So you need some good account management there. Then you need, of course, the second part, that is which is the analysis platform. The analysis platform, I won't go into too deep, since it's not up to me to talk about it anymore as the Netherlands, but it's up to the UN now, since we gave our intellectual property away to the Secretary General. These fields are analyzed in the tool. It's about payment information, it's about destination, travel company, ages, and all that. It's not always complete, but most of the time there's enough in there to either use our watch listing for the people we know and search for the people we don't know but have suspicious behavior and indicators. Then we plotted on heat maps to figure out, and time lapses to figure out stuff you cannot ever find out with your finger using Excel sheets. This one is one of my favorites. It really helps to identify people meeting, for example, at airside, doing the handover there and leaving, so they never cross a border. And this is really helpful to identify people coincidentally visiting each other every time, using a return ticket, only staying there for a few hours at airside and going back. You can never identify that by traditional border police or monitoring people crossing the borders, since they don't do it. Then there's, of course, the legislation. Since we all make mistakes, the real interesting conversations I have is with people who don't only advise, don't only think of good ideas, but have experience being stuck with their own solutions. So like our countries now in the European Union, we are building our own detection capacity, and the most interesting conversations we have is with people thinking of solutions, implementing it, and then, you know, having to deal with it. That is the biggest challenge, and I can tell you, we have implemented it, and if I could do it again, I would definitely change certain stuff. And to make sure that you don't diverge in your program, building your own detection capacity, is that you need to keep in mind that we speak different languages. If I would ask Mauricio here, as a technical expert, what do you think of when I mention the item of data retention? He would answer perhaps, how much CPU and storage would I need to buy? If I would ask this to a lawyer, they would think of human rights, protecting the data and deleting it, masking it out, anonymizing it, all that. If I would ask an operational expert with field experience, they would say, maximize it because I want to look back as long as possible. So make sure that when building such a capacity in your own country, that they keep aligned. And, you know, keep working on it. Keep working on the pin that connects all the different streams in your program. Because this is a release of today's hack. Well, it was hacked earlier, but you don't want this in the newspaper, because it will, if this wasn't Cathay Pacific, and it was your own PIU, you would have a hard time defending the existence of a PIU with your national parliaments. At least we would. And you would risk everything. So make sure that if you talk about, for example, security measures, that you know that you don't only look at it from a technical point of view, but also who has access to the data. It's operational as well. And then the interoperability. Rest assured, the community is warm and happy to help out. There is a lot of experience out there, and there are a lot of working groups, and everyone is helping each other out. And please,
the Dutch Passenger Name Records
sure
Act,
that you use
PNR
that.
Act for short, implements the European PNR Directive. The PNR Act requires airlines to provide reservation and check-in data to a passenger information unit called the PNL. Passenger data includes information that is essential for investigating and preventing terrorism and other serious offences. The PNL can share the data with a number of competent authorities: the National Police, the Public Prosecution Service, the Special Investigative Services, the National Police Internal Investigations Department, and the Royal Netherlands Marechaussee. Like the Netherlands, the other EU member states are also required to set up a Passenger Information Unit, a PIU. This will allow member states to work together by sharing information. The goal is to make Europe safer together. These developments are not just taking place in Europe. The United Nations Security Council, in a new resolution, has obligated member states to collect and analyze PNR in a similar manner. The PNL collects and processes passenger data 24 hours a day. Specialist staff analyze the data collected, looking for patterns of interest and high-risk cases. When such are identified, the PNL can ask the competent authorities to investigate further. The data may only be analyzed and used for the purposes of preventing, investigating, and combating terrorism and serious crime. In this way, the PNL assists competent authorities in their conduction of targeted investigations. The unit does not carry out these investigations, nor border controls of their own. Collecting and processing passenger data requires advanced technology. Engineers worked with operational and security experts to build the travel information portal, which we call TRIP. TRIP protects people's privacy effectively, incorporating automated data protection measures such as logging and role-based authorizations. TRIP automatically filters out and deletes sensitive personal data such as medical information. TRIP also blocks searches that are too broad and masks data after 6 months so that personal data is not visible anymore. With TRIP, the Netherlands has developed a secure and reliable system for implementing the European PNR directive. Therefore, the Netherlands also makes TRIP available to other countries. The PNL is an autonomous unit hosted by the Royal Netherlands Marechaussee and receives its instructions through the National Coordinator for Security and Counter-Terrorism. The PNL operates under jurisdiction of the Minister of Justice, who carries overall responsibility. The Minister of Defense is the administrator and responsible for the management of PNL. So how does the PNL work in practice? Let's say the police are conducting an investigation into an organized crime network. The network frequently makes use of air travel. They turn to the PNL for assistance. Together, the police and the PNL look for commonalities in travels made by known members of the network. The PNL finds that, in many cases, one-way tickets were booked the day before departure and paid for in cash. They also find that the ticket was not booked in the country of arrival or departure. By comparing this set of selected risk criteria with the passenger data, the PNL can establish and identify individuals whose travel movements match those of known members of the criminal network. The PNL shares the results and data with the police, who are then able to identify previously unknown members of the network.
So short clip, and I'm running out of time, so I'll wrap it up. Is it difficult? Yes, it is difficult. Don't underestimate it, and make sure that you have a solution that fits your country and your necessities. Don't, Simon, and I'm happy to discuss it later on, don't just copy-paste anything from anyone else. Make sure that you have your own knowledge there implemented. Because in the end, like I said, there are a lot of users with a lot of experience, very warm community, and we are very much there to help out. In the end, of course, we want what's on the picture there, which is, since many, many years, the first flight from Ethiopian Air to Somalia. Because if we work hard at it and don't give up, we will facilitate again. And now for the most beautiful part, of course, and that's not up to me to talk about, we donated it to the United Nations for them to work with other countries, since we will not do that anymore.
Thanks, Jelle, and good morning, everybody. My name is Maurizio Gazzola. I was able to sneak in. Thank you to Chris and all the panel members and the organizer. I just want to give you a very brief pitch of what has been happening. Actually, a month ago, this is the picture that you see on the screen. The government of the Netherlands donated the intellectual property rights of the TRIP system. Again, we are up for a contest to find a new name of TRIP, of the UN TRIP, because obviously everything is TRIP, particularly in this conference. So we also need your help to come up with a new, nicer name, and that makes more sense. So this picture is key in a sense that obviously you recognize the Secretary General and Mr. Voronkov, who is the Undersecretary General for Office of the Counter-Terrorism, who's signing with the Dutch authority an agreement to give us the ability to use the software and actually to offer to member states, because that's the main value added that we can offer as the UN. So I'm representing here the Office of Information Technology, which is basically working as in support of the Secretary General drive to use technology, to encourage the use of technology and technology innovation in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore the member states achieving those goals. And in this context, we are working very closely and actually with the Office of Counter-Terrorism. So we are part of a program that has all the components that Jelle was talking about, the legislative component, the operational component, and the IT component, which is handled by us. Again, the Office of ICT in the UNODC has been providing software solution for some time to member states already. So that was the clear position where to identify the expertise to provide software solution to our member states. We're working on, we have been providing software for improving capacity in law enforcement, particularly in the financial intelligence analysis world for counter-terrorism, in the drug control, and through a suite of application. And also we are running, again, in response to the Secretary General mandate, a new program of technology innovation labs, where we are helping member states to use new technology for the fourth industrial revolution and reaping the benefit of that. So how is the model that we are using to support member states? Usually in the past we've been developing a solution, and now we are adopting a good one, and we are basically maintaining the source code of the solution. So we are putting on top of the solution the neutral kind of flag, which is the UN flag. So we are basically becoming a neutral broker for the provision of the solution. The solution is offered to member states free of charge. So we are basically engaging and saying, here is the software that we maintain, you take it, and we deploy it to relevant member states administration, and in the case of the trip, hopefully to the passenger information unit that will be established in all countries. And what we do in order to maintain the system, we basically cost recover the cost through a service level agreement, whereby every year we are asking the member states who are actually using the software to contribute to the cost of maintaining it. The other important thing is that we are not stopping at maintenance, but we have a team to continuously develop the software and to enhance feature, to put in the new technology that we're talking about. We looked at the fact that we are receiving from the air carriers in the PIU unit a large amount of information. So looking at possible artificial intelligence and other machine learning ways of attacking this information and taking out the value of this information, that was something that we're going to be working with the member states who are using the software and want to move forward into the next step. So our contribution there is really on a technical perspective, but we want to work with the expert, and the expert are the member states who are going to be using the software. Through this model, we have now more than 100 countries who are using one of the tools that we have on offer here. I don't know if you read the little text, but we have a financial intelligence tool that is out there in more than 50 countries, and actually the countries that are using the tool created an international user group, whereby every year we are meeting. They're giving us the priorities for development of the new features, and we are moving forward in helping them to address the issues that have been facing, and obviously the world is moving, and you see the first one is a we call it Go blockchain, and this was on the request of member states to look at cryptocurrencies and blockchain, how we find transactions that are going not through the banking system, but they are going through the cryptocurrency world, but obviously affect the money laundering effort, the counter money laundering effort. Timeout, yes. TRIP is basically, as you know, we have a very nice presentation, so I don't need to spend some time here, but we are now engaged through OSCT to take over the software and develop it and deploy it through the model that we described. The last slide is talking about the official handover that we spoke about, and we are now building a team of professionals IT professionals that are going to support this, and we already have 3 countries who have been engaging and talking to us to try to see what are the next step in order to adopt the system. I finish the last 3 slides in 3 seconds. That's my contact details. If you need more information, obviously I'm going to be here today, but I'm available on email anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maurizio, and thank you very much, Jelle, for your presentations here about API and PNR and how the TRIP portal works to process those data streams. And also very much a big thank you, Jelle, for highlighting the single window principle, which is very near and dear to my heart. So we will move on now to Felipe Mendes Moraes, who is currently head of the Export and Customs Regimes Division at Brazilian Customs. There he is responsible for the national coordination of all the IT systems that provide support to the national passenger control activities, including, of course, API and PNR. He will speak about that, and he will also speak about how Brazil is integrating biometric solutions into that passenger processing. So please, welcome, Felipe.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'll do my best to do it in less than 12 minutes to keep us back on track. My name is Felipe. I was responsible for the API and PNR system implementation in the Brazilian Customs. And hopefully, I can provide you here a picture a little bit different than we have been talking in these previous days here. And I would like to give you a more operational overview on how why we implemented, how we implemented, how we actually use it, how we do targeting with that, and some numbers showing the results. So I will actually show some pictures, some screenshots of the system, and also how we use a facial recognition system to actually find the targets that we are looking for. Okay? So starting on why, the number of international passengers in Brazil has more than doubled in the past 10 years. And on top of that, we had the 2014 FIFA World Cup and the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. So, and during those big events that we call in Brazil in so short period of time, we had to deal with the higher demand in security at the borders, and also at the same time higher facilitation due to the increase of flow of passengers into the country. So we had to use the same amount of manpower. There was no increase in the manpower, so we have actually to use technology and data to actually cope with the challenge. Pretty much simple, just a quick overview on what's the data flow, pretty much the same for everyone. Check-in, flight takeoff, goes to the single window of the country. In fact, in Brazil, it's the federal police, the one responsible for receiving the API and PNR data. They share that with us. We do store that into our customs database, and we use a 24/7 targeting to actually know the passengers that are going to be inspected by customs before the arrival. But the period of usage of the data, when we started to use the data, we realized that we cannot just use raw data. We have to treat the data before we can apply risk assessment into it because of a number of mistakes and a number of issues that are embedded on the data. We heard about it in the days before. So just a few examples. Incorrect data. There is a lot of incorrect data inputted by airlines into the system every day because there's someone doing the checking the passport. Sometimes somebody's in a hurry and they just type anything into the system. Like for instance, passport number 11111. That's not a passport number. So if I have a blacklist looking for a specific passport and that type of mistake happens, I'm not going to find anyone. If I have a targeting rule, trying to see whoever is flying too much, I'm going to find a lot of people because this type of mistake happens all the time. So, for instance, we have more than 540 passengers with the same doc number, 11111, the last 3 months. That's a lot of mistakes. So we can apply penalties to the airlines, of course, but it happens. So we have to deal with that. The system must be able to deal with those mistakes in order to be actually useful, right? Deception methods. Sometimes, if a no individual knows that person is in a blacklist, it will actually, on purpose, try to deceive and to change a little bit the passport numbers, for instance, that you can visually pass to. If you are in an airline check-in counter and you check the number that the person has inputted into a web check-in, and you check the passport number, it can pass through. For instance, change a 0 for a no, or an I for an L, for instance. Visually is the same thing, or almost the same thing, but in terms of software, it's a total different number, and that person will go through. So, just back a little bit. Incomplete or missing data. So my name has 3 parts, right? Felipe Mendes Moraes. I can still board a plane with my name spelled in a various different ways. I will board a plane. So M Moraes altogether. There's a lot of different ways. Mr. Felipe, Mr. Moraes. And if I'm looking for Moraes, and the airline inputs Mr. Moraes, I will board the plane, but the system, if it's not ready for it, will not find me, right? And also natural modification in personal data, like 2 passports, expired passports, marriage, name changes, etc., etc. So what we do is that we collect all the data, and we have artificial intelligence software that is able to segregate and to put each traveler movement, border movement, into a specific folder. So I actually know, or I have a pretty high level of certainty of whoever is going to the border, even though the data, they do have mistakes. Once I do that, it's much easier to apply risk assessment, right? Because I actually know who is the person, and I don't have to waste my time chasing the airlines and applying fines and try to make them do you have to do is, you have to check. Sometimes it happens. It's part of the process. It's a fast process, right? We cannot interfere into their business. So we call the responsibility to ourselves. So once I filter the data, I can apply the number of databases that I have into the customs systems, like internal revenue, employment, property, income, other agencies' data, company ownership, to do a proper risk assessment, and to actually find the people. So the system, it's what we call the unique traveler, because it can unite all the information that I have regarding a passenger. And that's a screenshot, that's myself. And I'm going to go through the data that we have. It was designed actually for the border control officers, customs control officers, and the risk assessment and the risk targeters to actually have all the information into one screen regarding a certain person. So here's the personal data. Obviously it's in Portuguese, but my name, taxpayer number, date of birth, passport number, nationality. The last trip I've made, I was coming from Amsterdam to Brasilia, in Brazil. The date, how many bags did I check in when I left the country, how many bags did I check in when I check in Amsterdam, the reservation locator code, seat number, the duration of the travel, how many passengers were flying with me, my income data, the risk assessment results. In that case, I was flagged for inspection. Fortunately, I didn't have any drugs with me, so I was clear. And this is a map of all the countries I've been around the globe throughout the history. All right. Also a map, pretty much similar to our Dutch colleague showed us. You can see the routes. Also, you can establish hidden relationships between people it's never very easy to see if you don't have this kind of tools. So like you're transforming raw data into actual information, and who is linked to who and in which level, right? Who has been flying with me in the same plane more than 3 times in the history, not necessarily in the same reservation. So you can see hidden relationship between people, and you can actually target those people. The information, it's already there. All you need to do is to transform that into, the data is already there. You need to transform that into information, right? So who is connected to who, first level, second level, third level, and then you all come back all over again. It's all there. This is a real case of targeting, just briefly show how we do. So this was a Brazilian national, very young, 22 years old. He was traveling from Paris to São Paulo. He stayed there for 26 days, and he was flying alone. That was his first trip abroad, and he has zero income declared in Brazil. So how come a very young person stays in a very expensive city such as Paris alone for 26 days with zero income? And we stop him, manually stop you for a drug assessment, and the result was $500,000 worth of methamphetamine. Some charts showing the results. So before 2014, or at December 2014, we started to use the data, and you can see a jump in the number of drug seizures in the airports made only by customs. We have federal police also working on that, but this is just customs, and you can actually see a 306% increase in the results. So that clearly shows that the data, it's really, really important in the process. But we have to also facilitate the flow of passengers, and the main challenge was, okay, I can do all this targeting, I can try to check all the data to see, but how do I find those targets without stopping everyone at the border and create a huge line and asking for passports? And the solution was Biometric's facial recognition system. So here we have, as we are speaking, 14 international airports in Brazil with the facial recognition solution online. It's linked to the system, and by the time I have a target, a combo, a package of information of all the info of why that person has been selected, and also the passport picture is sent to the facial recognition system, and it's seamless. You can walk through. You don't have to stop, you don't have to show your passports, you just walk through the customs gate like if there's no customs. But in fact, we have already checked all the data from the flight manifest, from the API and PNR, and we are actually checking 100% of the faces of the people that are crossing that gateway. So we have 2 cameras and a server, that's very simple, and a facial recognition software. And by the time you find a target, the customs officers, they do receive an alert and intercept that person for secondary inspection. This is the screenshot of the system. You can actually see on the left, you have the passport picture, on the right, the actual picture, so you can compare if the person is the same. And you have all the information for the questioning, why that person has been inspected or selected for inspection, what should you ask, and on the right, you can see the line of passengers just walking through that gate, and the system can capture their faces, and by the time you have a target, the middle screen, it blinks and gives you a audio warning to the customs officer to approach that person. Okay, so my last slide, we have the first line. You can see we have a little bit of increase of passengers arriving in the country before we use facial recognition, and using facial recognition, so we have more passengers, but we have 21% less inspections. So we have more people coming, but we have less inspections. But the thing is, I have 85% more seizures in the period than before, and I have 121% more value in those seizures. So I have less inspections, less burden, more passengers, and more meaningful seizures for those passengers. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felipe, for that very nice presentation on facilitation measures, targeted intervention. So now it's my honor to introduce Terry Wall. And if you want to know about API and PNR, you go to Australian Customs. So Terry spent 37 years with Australian Customs, and then after that with the Australian Border Force. He had a number of different roles, including ending up finishing his career as the commander of the Australian Border Force College. Currently, Terry is with the World Customs Organization, which he joined in May 2017. He's based in Brussels, and in this role there at the WCO, he is responsible for delivering border security-related capacity building to customs administrations in Southeast Asia. Today, Terry will tell us about, amongst other things, I believe, the GTAS system. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Chris, and thank you to ICAO for the invitation to talk here today. We have had a long relationship with ICAO at the WCO and IATA, as many know, in building the PNR data and API standards, but now we are moving into the space of helping members, customs administrations implement the systems. This presentation is slightly different again from those you've seen. It's very much about the system itself, the Global Travel Assessment System, with a number of screenshots. We're using this pretty extensively in our capacity building efforts to assist our member customs administrations to implement pre-arrival risk assessment. Obviously focused on border security, and I work in the security program, but also obviously trying to assist with facilitation of legitimate travel. I guess there's to echo a few points raised yesterday and this morning. While this is a technical presentation, just briefly, in our experience to date in helping administrations implement these systems, we've really learnt some lessons around in two areas in particular. The legislation, I would echo the absolute critical importance of having appropriate legislation in place to require the airlines to provide the data. Privacy, which has also been mentioned, and of course data sharing within the administrations or within the states and with other states. The agreements with airlines are also important. As previous speakers have said, it's not just a case of putting in legislation. We really do need to work closely with the carriers and carrier groups. And the single window, again, echo that. We will be working with other intergovernmental organisations who are similarly implementing systems like these to ensure that we are not creating a situation where we have multiple agencies within the one country requesting data from the airlines. And the third point is around passenger information units. They are important to have those set up well in advance of implementing the systems. So, what is GTAS? It is a turnkey application that combines all the necessary decision-making support that you need to receive and store the airline traveller data, both the API and the PNR. It will allow you to provide real-time risk assessment against that data based on your own specific risk criteria and watch lists. You'll be able to view high-risk travellers as well as the associated flight details and reservation information as previously shown by other presenters. And as with the stunning success in Brazil, I think that's what we should aim for, is to promote that expedited travel through fewer false positives and getting people through who don't need to be intervened with. GTAS was developed and is managed by a consortium of volunteer organisations and made available again at no cost to the community at large. Commercial and government organisations are able to use it. They will need to maintain, but they can also customise and enhance the software to their own needs. It has been built on a suite of open source software components and published under the GNU General Public Licence. We are working in partnership with the US Customs and Border Protection in promoting the use of GTAS as a solution for pre-arrival risk assessment. So the process for us is that we will engage with the administrations and then have the GTAS team from CBP come in and help, if required, with the technical implementation, training and some ongoing support. So the system overview, just quickly, we'll run through some of the user interface. and look at some of the screening tools available, and then give you some information about where you can learn more about the system. So there's three main application views. There's the flights, the passengers, and individual cases. And we'll have a quick look firstly at we'll spend a bit more time actually on the passenger details view, but before that, the flight view. So the flights, it's a fairly simple grid user interface that displays the rule hits, the watch list hits, the arrival and carrier information for flights in the filtered criteria. So flights can be filtered by departing airport, arriving airport, the carrier, a date range, inbound and outbound, and the flight numbers. So it's a fairly simple grid view. The passenger view, similar arrangement, but it's focused on individual travellers within the given filter criteria. When you then click on a rule hit flag, it reveals details about the match to the targeter, and will also tell them what the rules were that it's hit on. Thirdly, the case view. The case view displays, again, it's in the grid form, so it's a grid of the summary case information which links to individual cases. Then users can filter by passenger name, flight, case status, the rule hit category, and the date range. Further down, you can drill into an individual case, so it will display all hits on a flight or passenger and create a platform for communication, storing attachments, setting up an action to take regarding the travel, and the results of those actions. So effectively, it can be used as a case management system for those who don't have a separate case management system in their targeting centre or their PIU. The passenger details view. So there's 4 key tabs in here. The main views are designed to facilitate different roles and responsibilities within the API PNR system and to drill down into specific details about the travel of interest. We'll have a quick look at those 4 views. The passenger details screen. So this highlights the biographic, document, and hit-related information. The APIS screen. So this displays the relevant information to the traveller contained in the APIS message. So their embarkation, de-embarkation, bag tag IDs, etc. Then into the PNR. As others have discussed, there is a lot of data in here. So this PNR section summarises the critical information in various tables, and by clicking on a table record you can highlight the specific line in the raw PNR data that it was passed from. This teaches the users how to actually read the raw messages and leads the analyst to other relevant information. Flight history. So this identifies the flights on the traveller's current itinerary and any past or future flight reservations made. So the passenger screening toolkit just quickly moves through there. There's several tools built into the GTAS that enables the users to create user-defined rules and watch lists quite quickly. So the watch listing uses fuzzy name matching as well as a double metaphone matching with configurable thresholds, so you can set those to whatever works for you. In addition, there are built-in tools to identify possible affiliates, so the link analysis tool. I haven't got any slides of that, but it's a fairly simple to use link analysis system. A query builder and rule builder, so the users are able to create and save structured queries using critical data elements contained in the API and PNR messages. The queries allow users to refine the rule development to spend more of their time screening the travellers. And the rules are created using the same user interface, you don't have to go to a different system. Free text search. The free text search box is available from every screen to search passengers. Results are displayed in the grid, and potential affiliates based on matching text strings within the PNR messages can be viewed by clicking each link. That will take you into the link analysis, which then highlights the excerpt of the matching PNR and displays it. Fuzzy name matching, in addition to the documented watch lists, so the exact match on document type, document number, and the passenger watch list, so on the first name, last name, date of birth, etc. And so there's two types of fuzzy name matching. The watch list actually includes a phonetic name matching algorithm called double metaphone, so it will index words by their English pronunciation. For example, passenger SHAUN will be considered a match to SEAN, etc. Right. So watch list importing, just a simple process. The user is able to import and export passenger and document watch lists from the front end, in addition to adding individual records. So all of this is fairly straightforward, but we will provide some training if it's required, just to get the customs administrations up and running with the system. So it is all available, where you can jump in and have a look at this anytime through it for free on the GitHub. It is all of the source code is downloadable. It's human readable. So you'll also find there the technical guide and the installation guide. There's some sample synthetic data. There's an API PNR systems implementation guide, but also details of how we can get in touch with the development team. You can request a live demonstration. Individual users can submit feature requests, so if they want to add a new feature. And there's also data model diagrams and process flow diagrams available there. So how do you get started? Contact either ourselves at the World Customs Organisation or go online and complete the GTAS intake questionnaire. The WCO and Customs and Border Protection will then conduct a site visit to determine the technical feasibility and the operational readiness of your agency or administration. We'll work on a pilot and set some parameters around that. We'll develop the system and training and IT services. We'll work with all of those areas. And then there's a fairly quick, actually, transition of knowledge to the member country. And then hopefully, over a fairly short period of time, they'll be able to establish their ownership and use of the system on there independently. Some of the key challenges we've got, we are dependent on donor funding for this. There is procurement equipment sometimes required by the administrations. Obviously, acquisition of the airline data, it can be done for free, but there are other options which will cost money, and obviously there are costs associated with training. The single window I mentioned earlier, customs is not always necessarily the front line and may not be the agency that naturally will be chosen by the government to collect the data. But as in the Brazil example, even if they are not, then they can always potentially get the data from that other agency and still use the system to risk assess it. And there's plenty of challenges within some of the administrations we're working with on their capacity, but more broadly to meet the program requirements, but that's all part of the assessment visits we conduct. So in closing, again, as previous speakers have said, there is a lot of planning required for this. It's those key elements I mentioned at the beginning about getting the data, setting up the system and then maintaining it does take a lot of thought. I think the very first place to start for some administrations is to work with their national carrier until they can get up and running with others. We really think it's important also for the early in the process for the all the stakeholders in the member state to get together to discuss how this might occur. That's absolutely critical. Not having one agency just run off on their own and try and implement this, because I think that's bound to end in disaster. But anyway, that's me. Done, only slightly over time. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you very much, Terry. It's great to see you back at ICAO, and your contributions to the working groups was always well noted. So we're moving on now to a presentation by Interpol. Fabrizio Di Carlo is our next presenter. Fabrizio is an Italian police officer who is currently seconded to Interpol, where he's working with the forensic and the police data management subdirectorate. There, he's also working on, he's the project manager of the digital Interpol alert library and manages Interpol's main border databases, including their modernization. Fabrizio obviously will tell us about how a state can use API data, for example, to check international watch lists, databases maintained by Interpol, and how the National Central Bureau of Interpol can work together with the single window facility receiving API data. Please welcome Fabrizio. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank you. Thanks ICAO for the invitation. This is my third year that I'm delivering speech at the TRIP symposium, so it's a very pleasure to stay again with you. And thanks for the trust, because after 3 years you are still considering my contribution important. Today we will talk about the link between API and Interpol, and the objective of the presentation is twofold. One side, I want to illustrate the interaction between API system and Interpol. And the second objective is to illustrate the best practices and recommendation to be followed to reach the most robust integration between API system and Interpol. I'm the 6th speaker today. Yesterday we started to listen about API system from 2 people, and then another 3. So I'm the 6th speaking about API. I think you know everything about API now. You know how, you know what, you know when, and probably what we have not discussed too much is when API is implemented, what to do with the date. I want to link what Eric said yesterday, because Eric highlight how much important is how to exploit the data once the API system is implemented. What to do with this data? And of course, we have to identify risk with this data. How? Analyzing the data and searching, querying the watch list. So today I'm here to represent the watch list. So today I'm not Fabrizio, but I am a watch list because Interpol, my organization, has databases that you probably know very well, the stolen lost travel document and the Interpol nominal databases. And you can query these 2 databases using the bulk of data coming from the airlines. So first of all, what data can be checked against Interpol database? This is a slide that I simply copy and paste from the guidelines on advanced passenger information that was produced by WCO, IATA, and ICAO. Here you can see that there are 3 main elements of data: the data relating to the flight. For instance, the IATA Airlines code, the flight number. You have data relating to each individual passengers. So you have personal data, and you have data of the passport that the passenger is bearing. You have also additional data like the visa information that maybe is information that is taken by the airlines. And if we see this second element, the data relating to each individual member, you can see that we can receive a set of data. Most of them are exactly the data that can be used to query our databases. If you see the first 3 elements here, the issuing state or the organization of the official travel document, if you see the second one, the official travel document number, the third one, the official travel document type. Well, these 3 information can be used to query Interpol SLTD database. So if you find a way to interconnect this information coming from the airlines to the national authority in charge with the API system, and you are able to transmit this data to Interpol, you can query Interpol SLTD database. There are other information that are very useful, because you can see here that still from the machine readable zone of a document, you can receive the surname, the name, and the date of birth of a passenger. Again, these are 3 elements that we need to query our Interpol nominal databases. So the idea is to link this information to Interpol, to receive this information, to query our database, and to produce a result in order to identify people that is a risk for the security. All the other data will be immediately cancelled, because when a data does not trigger, does not match any information in Interpol database, we automatically cancel it according to our rules on the processing of data. So what is the key element? The key element to do it is the integration between API system and Interpol. In order to integrate this two systems, there are 4 important activities that must be undertaken. The first is to find the mechanism that will forward API data when received by the national authority in charge with the management of API data to Interpol. The second is to filtering this data, because you have seen that there are a lot of information in the API data set, and we need simply 6 of these information to query SLTD and the nominal database. So we don't need to receive a lot of information. The third important and key factor is to ensure that the data is harmonized. A kind of standard by design. It's one of the most important recommendations that Interpol also deliver to the stakeholders that wants to collaborate with us. We fully support the UN EDIFACT PAX list, that is the standard that is recognized by the guidelines of API. Why? Because if we receive data always in the same format, will be easier for us to set up our system in a way that we can receive this data, we can process without any additional burden for either for Interpol National Central Bureau or for us at the General Secretariat. This is very much important. It's one of the key elements that I want to highlight. Harmonization and the use of standards is very much important for Interpol. And the last point that we did not discuss so far is the standard operating procedure. When there is a match between a data that we receive from the API and it match a data in the Interpol database, all the stakeholders must know what to do. This is really relevant, and this is one of the key factors, because we have to be sure that at the national side, all the stakeholders, as soon as there is an Interpol alert, can react properly and in accordance to the national legislation. So anytime there is an integration between the API system and Interpol, we strongly recommend to produce standard operating procedure. So what are the two databases that I illustrated before that you can query? One is the nominal database. At Interpol, we maintain a database of nominals, people wanted or suspected criminal, person linked with terrorism. We maintain a database of missing people, and we have 3 important category. We have the category of notices, diffusions, and messages. You can query all the 3 by providing the National Central Bureau of Interpol with information about name, surname, and date of birth, as I said before. The second database is the Interpol SLTD database. Indeed, Interpol SLTD database contains not only the stolen lost travel document, but now it's very difficult for us to change the name because SLTD is become kind of brand. In SLTD there are also additional information like documents that have been revoked or invalid document. This is a new things that we have implemented recently following some recommendation of our member states. In SLTD now you can insert data of documents that have been invalidated, for instance, because expired but not returned to the authority, document that has been replaced before the date of expiration. We know that there are many countries that is analyzing the cost benefit of issuing document online without the obligation to return the passport to the authority. This document remain in the bracket in circulation I would say, that remain to the legitimate bearer, and we don't know if can go in some criminal situation. Therefore, if you want to share this information with Interpol about this document, you can do through the invalid category. I wanted to spend a few words about it because it's new things that has been implemented this year. Again, 3 information we need to query this database. The 3 information are part of the API dataset. Type of document, countries has issued the document, and document identification number. With these 3 information, indeed, you can also query our nominal database through an application that is called the TDON, the Travel Document Associated with Notices. This is an application which extracts from the notices, so from our nominal database, travel document identifiers in a separate domain. And when you use the 3 elements to query SLTD, the same query is simultaneously performed against the nominal database using this application. Now, let me spend a few words on how we can do this integration. This integration it can be done with the Interpol interoperable services. I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the Interpol interoperable services in the next session, because I paid twice compared with my colleagues, and I have another session later to discuss a little bit more about this topic. But basically, Find and iBatch are 2 systems that are ready to integrate to an API system, national system. Find is well aligned with the IAPI, the Interactive API, while iBatch is more indicated when the countries receive the batch-style API. This is based on web services with the standard technology, XML for Find. It's basically a B2B solution. We will discuss a little bit more later during the next session. About the conclusion, I go directly to the last slide because I synthesized the conclusion. I have here a set of recommendations, and indeed this slide comes from a project that Interpol participated a couple of years ago under the UN umbrella. We did a lot of raising awareness conferences in certain countries on the use of API with the UN that was leading this project, but also with IATA, with ICAO, with the OSCE, IOM, and all these partners of Interpol recognized the importance of these recommendations that are very much linked with Interpol. So first of all, of course, the utility of using API data is evident when the API data is checked against the national and international watch list. We talked about it throughout this presentation. And something else is that the role of NCB is very much important. NCB is the National Central Bureau. I am here representing the General Secretariat, but the National Central Bureau should play a role within any national implementation API activity. So we strongly recommend that the NCB can be considered as a key stakeholder because it's the entity that will facilitate this transmission of data coming from the API to Interpol. Standard operating procedure, we already said, that is very much important that SOP are developed and laid down in the framework of this API system, national system. We encourage the use of an interactive API that is fully integrated with Find. This also facilitates the process of the information a little bit in advance that with a batch API that arrive at the very last minute. We encourage the single window, of course, because the NCB wants to speak with one single entity at the national side. Otherwise, we have to create several links with all the agencies. And the use of the harmonized data. And finally, thank you, because you highlighted before this issue. We are a watch list today, and we want to remain a watch list. But to remain a watch list, we need to be sure that the quality of the data, the accuracy, is maintained. We need the data that is timely inserted in Interpol. So the contribution. Sometimes we forget how much important is the contribution. We foster all the member states to contribute timely and accurately to the Interpol SLTD and nominal database. Otherwise, the value of our watch list decreases dramatically. Thank you very much, and we will see you in the next session. I will continue to annoy you a little bit. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio, for that very nice presentation. We're getting close to the conclusion of our session, so I would remind you to please submit your questions if you have any via email, or we will take them afterwards. We still have one more very important presentation to go from Ilker Duzgoren, who has just recently joined IATA. He's from Turkey, and he has joined IATA, and he's in charge of passenger data. And he's the secretary of two very important working groups. He's the secretary of the PNR Gov working group and the PAX-List working group. These are the technical working groups tasked with maintaining the message formats for both API and PNR. Ilker will speak to us today about interactive API. And Ilker comes to IATA with vast experience in passenger service systems. He has led the implementation of a number of data exchange systems, both API, batch, interactive API, and PNR systems, in the cooperation between airlines and, of course, border control systems, as well as passenger reservation systems for PNR. Please welcome Ilker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to first ICAO for inviting me to participate in the TRIP Symposium. And I have the privilege of being the seventh speaker about the API today. So I will start with a short highlight on passenger data, what it means, and how it can support passenger identification. So the passenger data, as we refer to it, includes the advanced passenger information, which is known as API, and the passenger name record, PNR. They are two different sets of data. The API is the biographical data, such as full name, date of birth, nationality, and flight data, and is captured at the check-in. The passport information is extracted and verified, generally through the swipe of the MRZ in the travel document. This data is electronically transmitted to government authorities and allows states to pre-identify passengers who is flying into or out of their territory. The PNR, passenger name record, on the other hand, is the flight itinerary information and the associated information of a passenger and the people he or she is traveling with. And this information exists in the airline reservation system. Sure. The API is extracted from the travel document, whereas the PNR information is present in the airline reservation system. This is the main difference between the two of them. The PNR information may be available up to 1 year in advance of travel, depending on the time of booking. Also, depending on the airline's business model, the information in the PNR may be minimal. It is important to note that the PNR information is only an unverified and declarative information. As PNR contains data pertaining to travelers' preferences, such as special service requests, form of payment, or contact details, it may contain sensitive personal data, which is subject to privacy laws in some jurisdictions, notably in Europe. As we can see, there are some fundamental differences between API and PNR. API helps authorities to identify people, often persons who the authority has already knowledge of, such as people on a watch list or in a known traveler program. PNR, on the other hand, allows states to run risk assessments and for the identifications of suspicious trends, relationships, and travel patterns. Let us now see the global implementation rates of API and PNR programs. The implementation of API currently stands at 73 states and territories, 57 of which have implemented the batch API, and 16 are already using the interactive API. The utilization of PNR programs, on the other hand, is currently standing at 25 states and territories. As we can see, there's a clear gap between the number of UN states and the number of those who have implemented API, which of course is now mandatory for all states. For the sake of time on this broad topic, I will skip this slide by only reiterating the Amendment 26 to Annex 9, which elevated API to a standard, as of 23rd of February 2018. Let us now have a look on both types of API transmission, the batch API and the interactive API. Batch API is the simplest form of API to implement. Here, the carriers automatically transmit a single list with details for all passengers on a specific flight. So all passenger details are transmitted as a single file, hence batch. The data is usually provided upon the closure of the flight boarding. So batch API is designed originally for the control of arriving passengers by the destination or transit country. The data quality validation, therefore, is limited on the batch process, and there is no real-time correction that can be requested. As an alternative to batch API, many states are now adopting the interactive API as their preferred method of receiving passenger data. Under this system, airlines provide passengers biographical data now in real time on a passenger-by-passenger basis to the authorities at the time of check-in. This means before the flight closure. The authorities have then the chance to evaluate this data and determine if any issues are preventing the passenger from entering the destination country, leaving the origin country, or boarding the flight at all. Following this assessment, the authorities send a board or do not board response or an advisory message to the airline. This happens also in real time. But how is this board or no board responses generated? So it is triggered with the transmission of API information for the passenger from the airline departure control system to the border control authority system. Once receiving the standard PAX list message, the border control authority system, in connection with all the other agencies and databases within or without the state, or within or outside the state, such as the national database, visa system, electronic travel authorization system, the Interpol SLTD, or any other, or watch lists of foreign states. So this response is then consolidated and sent back to the airline departure control system, and this happens generally within a few seconds. So this is a machine-to-machine communication. It is important to note at this point that the individual databases that we are talking about, where the state is querying, must be clean and well structured so that a proper and a reliable response can be generated in those few seconds. Now the single window principle. The API data may be needed by several different agencies within a state. We've talked about this. It may be customs, border control, law enforcement, or many more. So airlines should not send multiple messages to multiple agencies within the same country. It just duplicates the effort. It's very hard to maintain and it's not feasible at all. So states should therefore establish, for those states which are new to the API implementation, should establish a single window which distributes the incoming information amongst the rest of actors. So the interactive API's pre-identification features can be useful for immigrations and customs authorities, but also for aviation security as well, through prevention of undocumented or unauthorized people from boarding the aircraft. Furthermore, the IAPI system decreases the cost of treatment of such travelers on arrival. That is an advantage for both the state and the industry. The API system also helps managing the increasing volumes of travelers by facilitating the legitimate travel while ensuring the aviation safety. Of course, interactive API systems, being interactive systems, should be capable of providing real-time responses around the clock. This means support centers should also be available 24/7 for technical reasons or carrier staff queries. A robust risk assessment facility should also be in place so that they can generate a timely and appropriate response. Compared to batch API, interactive API systems, therefore, are more complicated and costly to implement. However, let's not forget that there are great benefits on both security and facilitation aspects. In order to have an effective, high-performance passenger data exchange system, API, PNR, or interactive API, alignment with existing international standards and agreed best practices is essential. Airline industry, having already spent hundreds of millions of dollars in developing automated systems to comply with international standards, can provide assistance and expertise to the states. Having said that, these systems and the additional programming on changing these systems to comply with new requirements are also costly. Non-essential data requirements simply add to costs, impacts the operations, and causes delays on the airport on various phases of the journey. The best program is one that involves transmission of only the essential data elements for border control processes, which is the data available in the machine-readable zone of the travel document. Before the development and implementation of an interactive API system, stakeholders should be consulted, as they have the capability to share information on what they can and cannot do with the existing systems. The best API implementation programs are developed by countries which involve airlines and solution providers early in the process. Communication with stakeholders leads to better initial structural design and to a better final system. Cooperation with other national and international agencies and organizations such as Interpol, Europol, UN, as well as foreign states regarding the watch lists, databases, information sharing, intelligence updates, as well as potential conflicts of laws is crucial. IATA, ICAO, and WCO, and many other international organizations, as we have heard during the symposium, are available to provide technical and policy support on passenger data exchange process. In this regard, a key element to remember, which was already mentioned several times, is certainly the implementation of API programs, which is now mandatory, and it is essential for the member states to do it right. A good first step would be to consult the IATA ICAO WCO API PNR toolkit, currently publicly available online. The API PNR toolkit contains introductory presentations and videos, checklists, and guidance material to help with the design of passenger data programs that are harmonized, efficient, and valuable. Having said all of this, I would like to conclude my presentation at this point, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ilker. Thank you for that presentation, and thank you, Denis, for the timekeeping. We're 5 minutes over, but I think and I hope that you enjoyed the presentations and that they were very useful for your knowledge base and gaining. I've received the question via the iPad here, and basically, I think it's for you, Ilker, I would imagine, and the question goes that can a state send its e-visa information to the airlines through the use of interactive API? So basically, I think it's, can can a e-visa be validated in some form through the use of Interactive API. And if
So the e-visa information, if it is stored, and it is stored in the visa database of the state, can help the airlines, can help to generate the response to the airline in case of an interactive API query, yes. So airlines who are sending the biographical information to the state can receive a response from the state, and we are encouraging states to implement interactive API solutions if they're going the e-visa direction. Because e-visas which cannot be verified or can only be verified via a phone at the check-in or any other way is just against the spirit of facilitation. Mm-hmm. As Diantha Rogers has said yesterday, an e-visa solution that can only be verified at the check-in desk by calling someone at the Border Control Authority, if you have 400 passengers in front of you, is not going to work. So the implementation of an interactive API program is really essential for states considering the implementation of an e-visa.
Okay, thank you. And I think so the specifications for that are also managed by the PAX list?
Yes, the message standard already supports the e-visa information, and that is already available in the PAX list. Yes.
Okay. And so, do you think additional guidance information on e-visas would be useful to steer us through that process?
Yeah, definitely. There is a clear need on having a best practice or implementation guidelines for e-visa, as stated yesterday, for both states and for airlines to how to communicate this with the states. There's definitely a good value in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ilker. We are over the time, so I have a number of questions that I would like to pose, but I think, Denis, in the interest of time, we should move to the coffee break. And I would like to thank everyone for your attention. We heard a number of presentations today. Obviously, the solutions trip. GTAS are out there. We heard about a national experience from Brazil. Of course, the Interpol presentation about what to do with the data, the law enforcement use of API data, and of course from IATA about the future, about interactive API and real-time validation. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chris. Yes, a good hand of applause for our team. Thank you very much, Chris and the team. Yes, we're breaking for coffee right now, and I would invite, if you have any questions, our guests, I'm sure, will be happy to answer your questions. You just come down to the front of the stage and enter into a dialogue with our guests. The coffee break is sponsored by Entrust Data Card today. We'll see you back at 11 o'clock. Thank you for your cooperation. Enjoy coffee.